Trish L. Gleason, Assistant City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, September 11th, 2023, at 6 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting a work session on Smart Parking Mobility Management Plan update and for the purpose of conducting such business that may properly come before the City Council.
Good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for September 11th, 2023. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council-contacts and through the City Clerk's office email at ctyclerk@cityofdubuque.org. Tonight's attendance is Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel.
Here.
Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
First on the agenda are consent items.
All right, do we have anyone here in chambers who would like to remove any of the consent items? There's 2 items today for separate discussion. I see no one here in chambers. Do we have anyone virtually?
Not.
Thank you.
No.
And no one from the City Clerk's office. Okay, back to the table then.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Resnick.
I move to receive and file the documents, adopt the resolutions, and deal with the consent items as recommended.
Second by Farber.
Got a motion by Resnick, second by Farber. Trish, would you call the roll, please?
Resnick.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Farber.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next items are items to be set for public hearing. We have 2 items to be set for public hearing, both being set for September 18th, 2023.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Jones.
I move to receive and file the documents and set the public hearings at the date and time specified.
Second.
Motion by Jones, second
With
by...
the resolutions to adopt there too, we better put that in.
Oh, there are resolutions. Thank you for noticing that. So added to the motion is to adopt resolutions. I hear from Mr. Jones. We got a second by Mr. Resnick. Thank you. Trish, would you call the roll, please?
Resnick.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next on the agenda is work session. Work session Smart Parking Mobility Management Plan Update.
Mr. Mayor. I move.
Oh, I don't think we need a motion.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Because we can just get to move right ahead, right? Or do we need to receive and file the work session? I don't think we do we? Nope, we can just move right along. Yeah. So thank you very much, Ms. Roussel. All right, turn it over to Ryan Nucky.
Ryan Nucky, Director of Transportation Services. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, City Manager Van Milligan. Transportation Services was approved to hire Walker Consulting to manage our Smart Parking Mobility Management Plan earlier this year. Walker has been working with the city departments, as in our finance department, parking department, leisure services, on things that we can work for and improve on what we're doing currently. We've also been working with different public input. We've done public surveys, public evening out at the Millwork District, and we've also been engaging different advisory groups to help us out with this to get input as we move forward. Currently, Walker and the city are in the process of creating an RFP for this project. We're looking at different technologies out there. Our current technology, which Mr. White will go through tonight, is out of its useful life. We are down to the end of it. Right now, there's a lot of new technology that's out there, and we're exploring that technology, including new LPR systems, license plate readers for the ramps. We're looking at new kiosk systems to use possibly instead of meters. You're going to hear the words options and alternatives tonight. These are just options and alternatives that are on the board right now. This is nothing that's being recommended by the city right now. This is just Walker giving an update on what is out there that the city could use. So Mr. White, or Kevin White, is going to discuss these options and alternatives and what we can do to move forward with this project. These options will range from new technology, new rates for the meters and the ramps, new hours, and also policy will be part of it. Prior to the changes with anything in the parking division, the city will come back with a recommendation to City Council before we move forward. Now I'm going to turn the stage over to Kevin White from Walker Consulting.
Do you happen to have a laser pointer? No laser pointer. All good. All right, good evening. Thanks so much. Well, thanks for having us tonight. We really appreciate your time. We've been hard at work with city staff. Our goal tonight is really to discuss our core parking policy management and technology alternatives and options for your consideration. You're also going to hear from our team at a later meeting focused on mobility-specific aspects of our work.
If you want to raise it up, there's a switch.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. So let's get into it. There is a lot of material here. We do think that this represents a real transformation for the city of Dubuque and its parking system. We're going to pause at various points in the conversation. There's a lot to kind of take in, so please do feel free to stop us. Feel free to ask questions. We're happy to have dialogue. So first off, just an agenda here for you. We're going to provide a few brief reminders of how we got to this point. We're going to discuss our options for consideration related to, as Ryan said, parking equipment upgrades, parking branding and communications, parking policy and operations, and we're going to end our conversation talking about the revenue outlook for the parking system, and then we're going to get into next steps. So let's get into a quick review. Here we are on the project schedule, or in phase 3. We're working on draft considerations. We're working on a path forward for you. The goal, as Mr. Nucky said, is to have a draft plan document for you, hopefully later this year, for your review and input. But we did want to talk about the guiding principles on this project that were established in the early outsets of this project. It is important to state that a healthy and efficient and balanced parking system is really key to a vibrant and healthy downtown. We do really believe that. The parking system must be integrated with comfortable walking, biking, and other mobility options. Parking is a key ingredient to keeping the downtown economically viable. It's a partnership between the public and private sector. And it's important that we promote equitability and inclusivity and access. We need to reach a diverse group of users through our parking and mobility system. We need to integrate parking with transit and other forms of transportation. And the final ones are really about establishing a revenue fee structure that's equitable. We do believe that that's a core principle. We need to use the most up-to-date technology. There's a lot of really good technology out there, a lot of good use cases from peer cities. And then we need to promote safety for customers and a business strategy that works in a post-pandemic environment. A lot of things have changed as it relates to parking and commuting, and that's really an important thing to think about, is how do we have that business strategy that works in a post-pandemic environment. So we have had a number of touch points with stakeholders, as Ryan mentioned. We did a webinar earlier this summer with downtown business stakeholders. We had some direct correspondence, follow-up correspondence with folks after that, and we're here tonight at this work session. So as far as phase 1 is concerned, we talked about these key findings in January, wanted to mention and sort of recap those tonight. There is, first of all, there's a lot of parking in Dubuque. This includes public and private on-street and off-street parking, lots and ramps, so not including additional levels of parking ramps. So if we're just looking at parking footprint, for off-street parking, there are nearly 36 acres of off-street parking in this downtown area. So our calculations are that over 50% of the downtown is either parking or road space. So that's really important to think about. We need to look for ways to be efficient about how we're using this space. We need to look for opportunities to right-size the parking supply where we truly don't need certain parking assets. And we need to look for ways to really leverage parking to promote housing, cultivate, walkability, vibrancy, economic development, density, bring new users and residents downtown. On-street parking, there's a variety of things going on here. We believe that the current system, it's a bit of a hodgepodge. There are a variety of rates and time limits. It's a bit confusing for the city as the operator. It's a bit confusing for the users. The technology is antiquated in the on-street parking environment. So we do think there's some impactful things that can be done to really simplify the user experience and that operator experience. Off-street parking, so we just talked about that. So facilities in general are significantly underutilized. The situation has rebounded a bit since initial data was collected in fall 2022. But we're still seeing, the city just helped with counts and the ramps. There are still about 1,800 ramp spaces that are empty at that peak demand time, which is sort of late morning on a weekday. So we need to look for ways to really drive up utilization of facilities, be more efficient, and frankly serve more customers, more users in different contexts. So it's not just commuters, it's residents, it's event goers, it's hotel parking, it's validations, all of these different things that we can do to get people using these assets, these very expensive assets. So looking for opportunities to serve these folks throughout the day, throughout the week, as well as on weekends. If you go by certain ramps right now, frankly, they're very, very empty, of course, because they're really catered right now to that 9 to 5 commuter crowd. From a technology standpoint, there's no secret here. The current technology is obsolete. A key point is that it's unsupported by vendors. And so when we have issues with current technology, there's no real way to reach out to somebody and get support, because after a certain period of time, those companies just do not support the equipment anymore. And so as you can imagine, there's a host of customer service issues, there's a host of city operations issues that come about due to that. Data-driven parking management, this is really critical. So the current technology really inhibits the city from collecting data, so that the city really doesn't know who's using the facilities at any given time, whether that be on-street, whether that be off-street. The city really doesn't know the availability of parking in the ramps at any given point in time. They don't really know the behaviors of who's coming to park and when. And this is really useful to manage a system in a nuanced way, to better serve customers and to better bring in revenue and just be more efficient about how we're using the system. And so that's just really not happening right now with the current state of the technology. Parking system finances, my colleague is going to talk more about this later, but right now the parking system is not currently self-sufficient through user funds. And so not including deferred maintenance, the system covers less than 60% of its operating expenses with operating revenue. And so the city is injecting a taxpayer-funded subsidy of over $2 million a year to balance the parking system budget. And so we would say that, especially now in these demand and market conditions, this is not completely atypical, but the city really needs to determine, is that the framework are we okay with that framework? What is our desired level of system subsidy versus user fees? Ongoing deferred maintenance does exist. Those expenses will need to be incurred. The city recently conducted a conditions assessment that identified ongoing deferred maintenance that is needed. And the system, frankly, may never be able to support itself through user fees. And that's really just a product of the demand and market conditions in Dubuque. I mean, you'll have 6, 7 parking ramps. There's a lot of parking, and right now the demand is just fairly depressed. And so whatever we can do to bring folks downtown, people living downtown, people dining downtown, event goers parking downtown, hotels using our parking ramps to park downtown, these are the ways that we're going to drive up demand, drive up utilization. We're going to talk a little bit about parking rates in a little bit, but also branding. So branding, wayfinding, communications. This is really, really critical. We see in a lot of communities often the frustrations with parking are, I don't know where to park. I don't know what the rules and regulations are. We're not seeing kind of a unified brand. We're not seeing consistent signage. And so that's a real opportunity here in Dubuque, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. Are there any questions on phase 1, key findings, before we pivot? Am I talking too fast? No, okay.
I think the pace is good.
All right, so little parking 101. So as we think about designing a user-friendly parking system, we need to think about who the users are, and this helps us understand what their needs are. And so we have 2 basic forms of parking: on-street parking and off-street parking. So for on-street parking, this really should be our shorter-term parking stays. So people parking for probably no more than 2 or 3 hours. And so customers on this side of the house, these are folks visiting businesses, These are customers and visitors at our downtown businesses. These are, in some cases, residents that have permits to park on street, But it's also passenger and goods pickup and drop off, loading and unloading with DoorDash, with Uber Eats, Amazon. This is what's happening on our curb space in current times. And it's also mobility and placemaking. So as we get into discussions about bike facilities, I had a discussion earlier with Mr. Resnick about that. We start to wrestle with, is on-street parking the best use of space? What about parklets, street dining, bicycle and pedestrian facilities? This is the on-street parking environment that we're thinking about. Off-street parking, so these are folks that are parking typically for longer than 3 hours. So we have our monthly contract parkers, whether it be reserved contracts or unreserved contracts. These are employees, these are residents that need to park off-street for over the entire day or overnight. In some cases, we have folks that are parking for a few hours or they're parking for a whole day in our lots and our ramps, but also things like validations. Does everyone know what a validation is? Parking validations, hotel parking. A lot of cities use public assets to park hotel users, and that's a revenue stream. It serves customers. But also event parking. We'll talk about Chaplin Schmidt Island and all the wonderful things going on out there and the opportunities around event parking in a moment. Any questions on this? Okay, so as we look at parking operations, there are a variety of functional tasks that we need to think about as we run an on-street or off-street parking system. And so these include taking payment. We need to control access into certain facilities, particularly ramps. We need to take care of contracts and permits, either for folks parking on-street like our residents, folks parking off-street like our commuters, or perhaps our residents parking in the ramps. We need to communicate and educate. We need to encourage compliance and in some cases conduct enforcement where that compliance is not there. We need to maintain and take care of our physical assets. And in our world, which is really important, is collecting regular data to inform decisions on a daily basis, on an annual basis. These are the things that we use to evaluate the performance of the system and make adjustments. And so all of these things are really important as we think about what should the policies be, what should the strategies be from an operations perspective, and what should the technology look like, how should it function. So there's a significant transformation that we're going to be talking about here tonight. We're going to talk about all of these elements that we just brought up, equipment upgrades, system rebrand, signage improvements, policy and operations decisions. Just want to make it clear this process is going to take time, commitment, iteration over the course of several years to achieve this. Most cities don't embark on such a ambitious path as you all are, but it's admirable. It can be done, but it's going to take time and hard work. We are working with staff to really figure out what is that ideal path forward from a priority standpoint. What do we tackle first? So any questions on parking system transformation before we get into the fun stuff?
Mr. Resnick.
Very quickly, you want to talk about sequencing. So are there any comparable cities of our size that have gone, aggressive and ambitious from antiquated and out of date like we are to something that we can all, be very useful? Are there other cities that are moving and has that sequencing been done?
Yeah, so we're working in the city of Omaha, Nebraska on a similar process. They basically, we'll talk a little bit more about this, they've upgraded their entire on-street and off-street environment, essentially all within about a 2-year span. It can be done. The nice thing is that you'll be able to kind of integrate the transformation. What you don't want is changing this ramp and then changing that ramp and then having 3 or 4 different systems. The fact that you're sort of tackling it from a holistic perspective gives you the opportunity to kind of integrate everything together.
Great.
But it has been done. It can be done. It's just going to take time. It's going to take this council to help provide feedback on functionality. What is the most appropriate thing to kind of push the gas on first in terms of equipment upgrades? We're going to talk about policy changes. How do we phase those in? We have a wonderful communication staff at the city level that's going to help us with rebranding and signage. How is that going to be phased in? It's an ambitious effort, and frankly, the staff definitely has their work plan cut out for them over the next 3 to 5 years or so.
Great. And quickly, did Omaha have an excess amount of parking, or do they combine building with all that?
I would say it is pretty darn typical in this part of the world that there's a group called the Parking Reform Network where you can actually go on and see the footprint in many downtowns across the U.S. that is occupied by parking, and you would be shocked. I am not here. Our goal is to make sure that if you have parking, it's used efficiently. If you have surface lots and no one's parking in them, then we would question whether or not that surface lot should exist. That's a prime example of kind of our philosophy on the matter. If you have a parking ramp that my colleague can talk about how expensive it is to maintain a parking ramp, particularly in this climate, there better be people parking in that ramp, probably 24/7 if you can have people parking in that ramp, because it's really hard to cash flow this operation. And frankly, the city of Dubuque has probably more public assets than other similar cities, perhaps in the state of Iowa. That's just a product of things that have occurred over the years. And so we're left with the situation, how do we make sure it all works holistically?
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so this is kind of the fun stuff. So we're going to start talking about equipment upgrades. I'm going to talk about on-street parking first. So we're talking on-street parking equipment upgrades. So just a reminder, I just parked today. This is the current condition. The city has old single-space meters. These are old Duncan meters. These emphasize coins. They are not reliable. The mobile payment vendor service has not been optimal either. The city has actually taken a Sharpie and colored out the QR codes on these meters because the scan the QR code to mobile pay is actually not working. So we're helping the city understand what the options are around upgrading the mobile payment service in addition to the physical hardware. And again, the city doesn't really have data about where are our most high demand areas? What is the typical length of stay of somebody parking on street? What are our revenue conditions like on street? How do I make projections about future revenue? That's been very difficult to do and understand in the current state of affairs due to the lack of data. So what we're proposing here is our preferred alternative is to remove the single space meters across the city. So what this does is it downsizes significantly the physical hardware needed to be maintained. So multi-space pay station kiosks like these would be installed. These would be placed about one per block face. I think rough estimates are there'd be about 100 to 125 of these kiosks across the city, depending on where the final paid parking, metered parking footprint looks like. These would accept payment via credit card and coin. The user would park, they would walk to, frankly, any pay station within that area. They would enter their license plate in the pay station. They don't need to worry about the space number. To initiate the session, they would select how long they wish to park. They'd make the payment. They'd be on their way. We would also integrate mobile payment with QR code and text to pay here as well. The time could be extended using the mobile payment app. We do have to be careful about QR codes these days. There are some concerns with people slapping stickers, fraudulent stickers on top of QR codes, but we can get around that with making sure that customers know to always look for the native signage and just be wary of any stickers that people have perhaps affixed on top of the other QR codes. But under this scenario, all of these old single space meters that you're seeing, what we would do, what we're proposing at least initially, is to remove the meter heads, but actually leave the posts, and I'll show you how this works in a second, to actually help guide the users to pay at these pay stations. So I'll show you how this works. So there are more images here of pay stations in Minneapolis. You can see those pink ones in Omaha, the ones with the sort of in the middle on the bottom, right here. You can't see my mouse. Bottom middle, that's actually city of Des Moines. We did help, as I mentioned, Mr. Resnick, the city of Omaha with the planning and procurement process to update their city from single space meters to multi-space pay stations. They have seen revenue increases. They've seen really good on-street turnover. They've seen increases in customer satisfaction as well. We did also help the city of Des Moines with this procurement process. And I would point you to the photo on the top left. This is Omaha. So they actually left the meter posts in the ground. They affixed a sticker to the meter post, and I'll show a close-up of this in a second, that basically says it directs folks to walk to the pay station to pay or to use the mobile app. So this helps sort of delineate the spaces on the street. It helps a bit with that learning curve for folks. People go, oh, where are the meters? In the future, the city could elect to physically just remove those altogether. So those are not actually required. So under this environment, the user is entering their parking or their license plate to park, and there are no space numbers anymore. So let's be very clear on that. So the city could elect in the future just to remove those posts altogether. Many cities do that just from even just a sheer aesthetics perspective. Any questions on this? Mobile payment would be always an option here. So this kind of shows the close-up of the two photos on the left. The one in the middle is Omaha. This shows the old meter post. Again, it gives information about what zone you're in. It says pay by plate parking. It directs the user to the pay station or to use the mobile app to pay. They actually literally just chopped the top of the meter head off. The photo all the way to the left is the city of Des Moines. That shows kind of how they did it, where they left the posts and they affixed signage to help users. On the right, you can see a license plate recognition or LPR camera. So this is a camera that actually goes on top of the city enforcement vehicles, and the city would use this LPR camera to enforce these on-street parking areas under this approach. So this dramatically streamlines enforcement from the city's perspective. It essentially turns it into an automated process. Any questions on these?
So we'd have to have a singular rate for all of the metered area if you're just using a license plate.
We'll talk about that in a second. So the system knows, based on the zone that you enter, what rate is charged in that
So
zone.
license plate and zone.
So you would have to, well, the kiosk itself knows what zone you're in because it's physically in that zone. So when you
You
walk,
said a minute ago you could go to any kiosk.
if you go to,
Have to be one in the
you go
zone.
to any kiosk within that zone.
Okay.
Just quick notes.
yes.
If you could stand in front of the mic when you're talking, just
Sorry about that?
sorry, no, you don't have to be that close, but try not to walk away because the people at home and you're recorded forever now, so we just want to make sure that everybody can hear it.
Yes. But the mobile app you would have to, in most cases, enter the zone. It's typically a 3-digit zone, and it knows where you are. And what we call this is pay-by-plate parking. We don't call this as opposed to pay-by-space parking.
So those of us that prefer not to walk that half block and back want to learn about the app.
Correct. So the beauty of the app is that once you set up the account, you enter your license plate in the app, it knows your license plates. You're not re-entering your license plate every time. And again, streamlines enforcement. The maintenance of this is dramatically decreased because we're going from 1,800 meter posts to about 100, 125 pay stations. So another beauty, so with the mobile LPR, you can enforce people parking and paying with the app. With the pay stations, you can also enforce the folks that have permits. So we have some residential parking permits in the city of Dubuque. Those folks would get a virtual permit. So we would put their license plate in the city's enforcement database, and the city can enforce those on-street areas, and they can enforce seamlessly the on-street paid parking as well as the residential permit parking all simultaneously. Questions on these? All right, fun stuff. Off-street parking, so we're going to talk about off-street, so ramps and lots. Current conditions, we talked about ramp equipment, it's functionally obsolete. There are a host of issues for the customer, for the operator. Some surface lots have physical single-space meters like the on-street parking does. Permits are handled through physical hang tags in most cases. Prox cards, so proximity cards, are used to access the ramps. And again, the city lacks data about how the system is being used. So first, the surface lots. There are some surface lots that accept hourly and transient parking or daily parking. So what we would say here is that this is the same exact approach as parking on streets. The same multi-space meters, the same mobile app would take payment. The city would use the same process for enforcement. So the city could literally drive the on-street areas and then drive in and out of the surface lot areas to conduct enforcement. Again, the users would park in the surface lot, they'd walk to a pay station, they'd enter their license plate, they'd pay for parking, or they could use the mobile app. We are still working with staff to determine the appropriate extent of hourly and daily parking that's going to be allowed in the surface lots, but this would be our preferred theory of operation, what we call theory of operation for the surface parking lots. Questions here? Just more close-ups of the pay stations. There are a variety of different brands, Flowbird, T2, IPS, or some that we hear about. We're very, very vendor neutral as a company. Our goal is to help the city get the best product that really meets their objectives. But there are differences. Some have physical buttons and black and white screens, and some have touch screens and that are color. But they're in most cases fairly similar. And again, these would accept coin and credit card, no cash at these machines. You can see examples of stickers and signs. The mobile payment vendors actually provide the signs free of charge. And we're helping, as I said, the city look at different options for mobile payment, getting a new mobile payment vendor. They would charge a transaction fee that typically gets passed on to the customer. It's typically about a 40 to 45 cent per transaction fee that would get passed on to the customer. And there are no upfront capital costs to bringing in a new mobile payment solution. They're completely upfront, free of charge. They just charge an ongoing transaction fee. So if the city isn't happy with its current mobile provider, we can move forward pretty quickly with getting a new provider in here. Questions on pay stations? All right, the ramps, everyone's favorite.
We actually have one question here.
Yes.
Can I ask one question? Could you go back just a minute on so the equipment is different than the service provider. A service provider is going to charge each identified license plate 40 to 45.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, great question. So we have service provider, so typically a vendor that you purchase the equipment from. That's the physical hardware. So that would be these physical pay stations, right? Or the LPR cameras, those LPR cameras I showed. We would then engage in a maintenance agreement with that provider for some period of time to provide maintenance through some warranty period. And then after that warranty period's over, the city would want to establish some sort of support plan with some other entity. There are no transaction fees if somebody makes a payment on the pay station. So it's literally, you pay for the pay station. These are about 8 to 10 grand a piece. There are some ongoing cloud hosting fees that the city would pay, but really it's a capital outlay for the pay stations. The customer doesn't pay a transaction fee, they just pay the hourly rate to park. If the customer wants the convenience, like I do, of using the mobile payment, the customer would pay a 45 cent, typically a 45 cent per transaction convenience fee. So they would pull out, so for example, if Mr. Kavanaugh wanted to park, he wanted to pay on the pay station, he's gonna park for 3 hours, it's gonna be $3 for him. I wanted to park for 3 hours and I use my app, it's gonna be $3.45 for me. And it's gonna say, you are going to be charged a 45 cent transaction fee, do you accept? And I can decline if I don't want to. I can always use the pay station, I can always go pay with credit card or coin, but if I want the mobile convenience, I pay the 45 cent transaction fees. Some cities eat the cost of the transaction fee. It's our perspective that that's a convenience fee. When you order DoorDash, you're paying a convenience fee. That's just a typical, it's how the mobile payment provider makes their money, frankly. Some of these mobile payment providers have minimum thresholds of numbers of transactions per month. This particular one, Park Mobile, does not. And again, we are very much vendor neutral. I would say that Park Mobile has a very, very high use prevalence in the state of Iowa, and it essentially checks the boxes, if you will, that we created to kind of vet whether or not these mobile payment providers would function in the system that we're conceiving for the city of Dubuque. So if the city wanted to move forward with a new provider, we do think that they're a great option. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Just for mobile payment. So in the ramps, this is where it gets really fun. So our preferred theory of operation is a gated parking access and revenue control system. So I'm going to use the term PARCS, Parking Access and Revenue Control System. This is basically just a modernized version of what you have today. So it's just got a lot more functionality, but we're going to talk about how it works from the perspective of your customer. So we're going to talk about this from the perspective of a contract parker. So this is somebody that has a permit to park in a given ramp, and a non-contract parker. So someone just wants to come in and park for a few hours. Maybe they want to park for a day, but they don't have a permit. So I'm going to go through 24 and 25. I have printouts in front of you for 24 and 25. When we go through 24 and 25, we're going to flip around a little bit because it's just really hard to show you without flipping around. So please do refer to your printouts. We're going to start with slide 24, which is the non-contract parker experience. So I don't have a permit to park in the ramp. I'm coming downtown. I'm going to a show. I want to park in the Five Flags ramp for 3 hours, or I want to park during the day. What would that experience be like? We're going to start with that. You're going to hear us use the term fixed LPR. So these are the cameras that you see in the bottom left image. So these are stationary cameras that would be mounted to speed up the entry and exit process for basically all parkers in this ramp environment. So again, this is where we're starting. You'll see there are 5 options to pay for a non-contract parker. We're going to start with pay in advance. So in this option, the customer could use an advanced reservation feature on their mobile app. So the same mobile app that we use to park on street, that mobile app has a function where I can prepay and pre-purchase parking in advance for the ramp facilities. What would happen then upon entry into the ramps, these are the entry stations you can see here, the customer would pull out their phone and actually scan the QR code on the entry station, and it would raise the gate. That's how they get into the ramps. Alternatively, the nice thing about this fixed LPR that you see, we're going to propose this at the, I'm going in the wrong direction, at the entry stations. You can see here on the bottom right, they actually have a fixed LPR unit. This is City of Rochester, Minnesota. If the customer on their mobile app in advance enters their license plate, that fixed LPR will actually raise the gate for them. So they wouldn't even have to pull out their phone to scan the QR code. So that's how they would pay in advance. On the way out, after dinner, after the event, the customer would just pull their phone out, scan the QR code on the mobile app to exit. Alternatively, that same mobile LPR or fixed LPR would raise the gate for them, right? So this is an automated raise the gate because the system knows ABC 1, 2, 3 prepaid for parking. The second option, I promised you I'd be flipping around. Entry. So the second option is pay on entry. So this would be event mode only. So let's say there's a big event going on. The city wants to require customers to prepay for parking. The reason this is nice is that it can speed up the exit after an event. So we'll talk about how this works. So the city could actually set the system to require payment on entry. So in this case, the customer would drive up, and this would all be clearly marked event rates. You were entering during an event. The customer would pay at the entry station with a credit card only. Ticket would be dispensed, and the gate would go up. On the way out, I actually have a ticket. Modern ticket. On the way out, the customer would take that same ticket and actually scan it, like scan the QR barcode at the exit station. You can see in the red terminal there, they'd scan it, and the gate would go up. So that's pay on entry. The third option is pay at a pay on foot station. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So these are stations that are placed in elevator cores and in stairwells. What would happen here is that the customer would drive up to the entry terminal, they'd pull a ticket. After their parking session, they would walk to a pay on foot station. They would pay with physical currency or a credit card before returning to their vehicle. So it's sort of on the way back to their vehicle. That machine, if they want a receipt, would dispense a receipt. The customer would then upon exit, insert the ticket or scan that barcode, as I mentioned, to raise the gate. Alternatively, these machines are sophisticated to know they associate the payment with the license plate. So this system, what it will do is have that camera just raise the gate upon exit. It knows that you've paid at the pay on foot machine and it just lets you out. The fourth option, pay on the mobile app. So in this case, the customer would pull a ticket on the way in, they would park, they would pull out their phone, open the mobile app, they would enter the zone number, so you can set a zone as like a ramp facility that it knows what to charge. The customer would scan the ticket, they would pay for parking on the mobile app, and then on their way out, they would insert the ticket or scan the ticket to raise the gate. The reason I'm saying insert or scan is that some systems require insertion and some require scanning. Alternatively, again, the mobile app knows what your license plate is, and so that camera would raise the gate for that customer driving out. So that's number 4. The fifth one is pay at the exit. So this is very typical. In many cases, this is what I do. Drive up, pull a ticket, park, have fun, and then on the way out, I'm going to this exit machine, I'm scanning the barcode, the ticket, and I'm paying, then inserting my credit card, and I don't have a laser pointer, but red image to the left. Can't see the mouse, can you? There is a credit card acceptance. You can pay with a credit card at the exit terminal. The gate goes up, and that's the way to pay at the exit. So are there any questions? So 5 ways to pay. Most typical is that people would likely pay at the exit station, or they would probably use the pay on foot machine.
I have a quick question. So is it,
Yes.
are there systems that do like 1, 2, 4, and 5? All, like they're,
Yes, sir.
they're able
So-
to do all that?
Yeah, the new systems are essentially a package deal. It's a parking access and revenue control system. For example, if you went with a company like SkiData, you would get the terminals, you'd get the pay and foot machines, you'd get the barrier gates, you'd basically get it all. The only thing that it doesn't do is that mobile payment. So we have discussed matters with one vendor, mobile payment vendor, and they're telling us that they can do mobile payment on street and off street. So no matter if you're parking on street or off street, you would be able to use the same mobile app to pay. So the answer is, yeah, it handles everything in one fell swoop. And so we'll talk about this in a second, we are developing specifications for upgraded equipment for the city, and we are specifying all of this different required equipment. Any questions on that? So 5 ways to pay. Pay on entry is really only during events. Pay in advance, I mean, you're really savvy folks are going to be paying in advance, but typically it's pay at the exit, pay on foot station, or pay using the mobile app. Make sense?
Mr. Rezza, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The most frustrating thing is when it doesn't work.
Yep.
Right. So is there another option for when, you're sitting there, there's a line behind you, it's not working, you tried this and that. So these machines, do you get that much? I get it when I go out of town and I'm not exactly sure what to do. And I think I'm doing the right thing and, honking, and my wife's talking to me, and it's very frustrating, right? And so what about this kind of thing? Is there, help me, and how does that work? And these machines generally, are they 99% efficient at
Yeah,
least?
so the LPR accuracy is, I think we're specifying like upwards of 98, 99% accuracy, read accuracy. So again, if your license plate is entered upon payment, it's going to know it's going to raise that gate. So you're not even having to fumble with the card. We'll talk about contract parkers in a second, but yeah, there are features where they're going to be able to, connect in with city support. So the city as the operator needs to be able to provide support at least during certain hours for folks. And in some cases, they, under dire circumstances, could raise the gate if they want to. But it is all automated. There are no cashiers in this environment. It's pretty darn. And this is University of Minnesota. Off to the left here, you can see this is a parking ramp that gets hundreds and hundreds of folks a day, and a week it's upwards of 80, 90% occupied at any given time. Busy Twin Cities campus. The ones on the right, this is new equipment at the City of Rochester public facilities. It's pretty darn reliable, but there is a learning curve. I mean, I think the city it's up to us to educate folks, create videos. The signage is going to need to be improved. It's going to take a little bit of time for folks to learn and understand the system, but they are pretty reliable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so wanted to talk about the other printout. You have a smaller printout. So this is if you have a contract. This is really simple. Let's say I have a permit to park in Locust ramp. My options are the same, entering and exiting. I'm going to pull out my Prox card at the station, and I would scan it at the station to raise the gate, either entering or exiting. Alternatively, if I have elected to put my license plate on file with the city, let's say the city says, hey, you have a contract, are you willing to have your license plate on file with the city? They say yes. The city then puts that into their database. That LPR camera reads and recognizes that plate as being a valid contract parker and then raises the gate. So the person doesn't even have to pull out their contract or their Prox card to get in and out. So that's the contract parking experience. So a couple other things here I wanted to point out. Again, University of Minnesota to the left, City of Rochester to the right. You can see the signage. It's really important that we have good signage out there. Barrier gates, entry station terminal, the open full signs. So these are digital signs that the city can control. And the system knows how many contract parkers and how many non-contract parkers are in the ramp at any given time. And so the city has the ability to actually close the ramp to non-contract parkers if it believes it needs to protect spaces for contract parkers. So let's say there's a lot of transient non-contract folks showing up. The city can basically have that sign say ramp full, contract parking only at any given time to essentially protect spaces it knows it needs for contract parkers. So that's the beauty of the new parking access revenue control systems. You can also push information out. In the image bottom left, it says space available. So because you have gates, you can actually push space availability information out to customers. And we can see the fixed LPR here as well. So more images. These are entry stations.
Mr. Resnick, hang on one second. We got a question here.
Just a quick question. I know many up-to-date places don't do it with parking, but you have this thing and it goes directly. It's like a debit out of your account. That you don't have a separate amount of money that you've set aside for parking, but it's just you use your debit card. Is that possible that they can use their debit card on this and it just comes out of their checking account directly?
So one, similar to what you're talking about, but not exactly, is the beauty of this new system is that you will be able to, in the future, offer something like the City of Minneapolis has a reloadable parking debit card. So it's literally a card. It's kind of like when you were a student at college and your mom and dad were putting money on it to buy food. You can put money on it and actually use it, and I believe they charge a reduced rate. So it's basically for contract parkers that don't want the all-you-can-eat contract. Like they don't come to the office very often. Maybe they come a couple of days a week, and it's more economical for them to just have this reloadable card. The new systems will allow you to just have a reloadable card, so it's sort of pay when you go type of thing. So my point is that it's an option that you can offer contract parkers in this new world that we're living in, where people say, you know what, I don't need a contract to come park 5 days a week, 4 weeks out of the month. How about another option, more flexible option that, I work from home 3 days a week. There are ways that you can use new technology to kind of have that reloadable style debit card feature.
So in London, they have the tube, you could just use an Oyster card, right? So they just have a card that you've preloaded, and then you can just use it. It's similar to that then.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And this, again, would be catered to commuter style folks. So folks that, let's say, work from home 3 days a week, maybe they go into the office 2 days a week. They don't want to buy the full permit. They want this other feature, this sort of a la carte feature These new systems will allow for that.
But the direct debit into their account isn't there because it needs to go through
Needs
this.
to go into the cart, exactly.
It needs to go to, because there is a cut from the company that needs to pay for all this equipment, right? Is that why there
It's
isn't a?
essentially a third, it's essentially like a physical card that you would get from the city as the operator that then they could input funds onto.
Right,
Or you
okay.
could input funds using like an online portal.
Okay.
But it's for folks, like, as I said, that don't want to come in and park, 5 days a week, 4 months out of, or 4 weeks out of the month.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Sprink, go ahead.
Kind of piggybacking on that, are the apps allowing you to do the similar, where you could put a designated dollar amount on your app, on your account, or not really yet?
I'm not seeing that, no. Those are always tied into your, obviously they're tied into your credit card. They're super easy. The advanced, I should mention too, like, you might have heard of Spot Hero or ParkWiz. I went to a concert in St. Paul a few weeks ago with my son, and I purchased an online reservation on ParkWiz, had the ParkWiz app, gave me a QR code, I showed up. And then the city, as the operator, knows how many prepaids it has, because the system tells it, 200 people prepaid for parking in this particular ramp. And the app will not let you in the ramp until after a certain period of time. So it said entry after 5:30, no overnight parking. And so you can, through the advanced feature, use like the Park Mobile app, but then also these third-party sites like Spot Hero and ParkWiz. This is more than you've ever known about parking.
Got a question from Ms. Wethel here.
So my question, I think, piggybacks off your question, Mr. Sprank, and that the pay in advance idea, I did that up in Minneapolis also. But those I sensed were not publicly owned lots. They were privately owned parking ramps that are through like the ParkWiz. So for instance, and this is maybe too far down the road, but if we install this technology, of course we want to utilize it to its greatest extent of technology it allows. So if we had people coming in for an event, could we get, they've never been to Dubuque, they're not Dubuquers.
Yes.
Could we somehow figure out a pay in advance?
Yeah, great question.
So like in your ticket,
Yeah.
there's a link to our city parking.
100%.
And then you can click on that and then you could pay in advance for your parking.
So with this system, let's say you're buying a ticket on SeatGeek or Vivid Seats, whatever. There's all these sites out there. They do have like pay for parking options. Some of those are tied into, Spot Hero and ParkWiz. To be clear, I used ParkWiz. I literally opened the app. I said parking in St. Paul. It came up with a bunch of options. Many of those options were city public facilities.
Okay.
And I purchased it. It was $5. I don't like to pay very much, so I parked a little further away for $5 instead of $25 right next to the venue. And then it charged me an 80-cent transaction convenience fee. And then it gave me a QR code that then I scanned upon entry. And so that is tied into the city system. And the apps are really quite nice, is that when you actually open the app, it turns the brightness all the way up on your phone too, because it knows that you need that vivid picture on the app. And so these third-party apps can sort of tie into your system. You need to give it permission. Like the city needs to say, yes, Spot Hero, yes, ParkWiz, you can play ball with us. But the nice thing about that is if someone's traveling to Dubuque, they have no idea where the parking is, they know what Spot Hero and ParkWiz is. So they can go in and they can say, oh, this Locust thing, I can prepay parking, purchase it. They don't even need to know that there's this other app because that's just what they're familiar with, ParkWiz or Spot Hero, and they can just show up and prepay.
And so we would create some sort of an agreement with this outside.
Correct. But you can't do that unless you have the modern system, right? Make sense?
Thank you.
Entry stations, there's a lot here. I don't have a laser printer, so I apologize, but there's a touch screen you can see there. There's actually the black box on the top is actually a camera. So if you're like, how do you use this? The person on the other end of the intercom is actually going to be able to see you. Below the touchscreen to the left, there's a credit card reader, a payment reader, again, for pay on entry. There's a tap to pay. My colleague uses that all the time. I don't really know how that works, but tap to pay. You don't even have to insert your credit card. There's a scanner, that red thing, that's for the QR codes. Below the red thing is a ticket spitter. That would be where I'd pull my ticket out upon entry. And then bottom, below the red screen, but bottom right, that's the Prox card scanner. So if you're a contract parker, you would just hold your Prox card in front of that, and it would go up. And you can see an example of like a modern parking ticket here. It's got the privileges, it's got the time you came in, it says no in and out if that's what the city wants to elect to do. It shows the date and time purchased, and it gives you that barcode scan to pay. Questions there on the entry?
Question.
Yes.
Yep. Mr. Russell, go ahead.
Thanks. A couple times you've mentioned, or you referred to staff. Somebody will be there to answer the phone, or somebody will be there to say, help, I need some help. So when you give us your final proposal, will you include the staff that's needed to support this new kind of equipment?
Yes, yeah. That's something that I think we're still fleshing out. These systems in theory are fully automated. So let's assume everyone knows what they're doing, they're past the learning curve. I mean, cities across the US are using these systems, busy ramps. So there really isn't there aren't performance issues that we're concerned about in terms of not reading barcodes or gates breaking or not going up. Assuming we can teach folks how to use these, but there's always issues, right? So it's gonna come up, it's gonna be to the city to kind of express their desire on when can we make staff available. We would say that certainly when you have busy periods, there needs to be folks that are on the other end of the machine. Typically, as I said, these are fully automated, but the city can control these from their office, essentially using a desktop computer. And so, but a lot of operations have actual operations, sort of intercom areas where staff sit and actually field calls. These often are the same people that do security walkarounds in the facilities. So, I think that will be something that we end up offering as a recommendation.
Thank you.
So just more pictures of that entry experience, different vendor. You can see the LPR up there, entry station, open full signs. These are really nice features. The pay on foot machines, we talked about those. These are typical standard practice. These are in garage, stair, and elevator areas. Usually these are just cash and credit card or just credit card only. There is a difference in price depending on what form of payment you want to take. We do want to say though that cash and coin acceptance does increase the cost. And so this is something that we're still kind of vetting and exploring with city staff about what forms of payment to actually accept. We would love to hear your input on this functionality tonight. But under our proposed approach, we're not going to be accepting cash at the exit station. So one of the things that we believe is that folks fumbling with cash at the exit terminal, it does clog up these facilities. And so if folks want to use something other than an app or their credit card, let's say they want to use coin or cash, they're going to have to do it at these pay on foot stations. This is their opportunity to do that. And again, we would integrate a mobile app experience in the garage as well. Have folks seen these? Do folks have any questions on the pay on foot stations? We do think, just in initial conversations, that it is important to accept some physical currency. I guess we would love the council's input on that. There's a question about, whether we accept paper bills and coins. It's pretty typical that machines have a cash acceptance. You could basically disable the cash acceptance. When you accept cash and coin, you need to think about security measures around collecting the money, counting the money, depositing the money. There needs to be protocols in place for that. There's obviously a lot of issues when you're dealing with actual physical currency. Any input or questions on pay on foot machines at this point? Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Wethel.
So when you have the pay on the foot and the only way to utilize cash is to pay on foot, is that
At one of these machines, yeah?
So I would assume then are very intentional about placement of that near handicap accessible
Correct.
spots.
Correct.
So placement's probably really important. important of those?
Yeah, we actually walked through the garages or the ramps with city staff and identified the best place for placement of these machines. So these are typically in elevator stairs and, stairwells, elevator cores, that kind of thing. But yes, fully accessible from all angles.
Well, and as you've mentioned, we're not the first city to have to make this transition, right? I mean, so there's probably a protocol in place that you've worked with before to be able to say, as we move from cash to a more cashless type of environment, this might be the transition steps that you take to get there. Is that, am I assuming correctly on that?
I do think the direct question of, do we want to accept cash and coin in the ramps? I believe the answer is yes, from an equity standpoint. Because again, under this scenario, want to just point you to, where's my picture? So see the bottom right? This is in St. Paul. It says no cash at the exit. Cash is only accepted at the third floor pay on foot machine. These are going to be the types of signs that you see in the future. But there are some concerns, at least from city staff, about physical cash, and I think they're good concerns. When you deal with cash, you deal with machines that have to accept bills, and the bills have to be creased and perfect, and then you're talking about wads of cash. Well, someone's going to have to count those, and we've done operations audits where you need clear bags. All the money needs to be counted in a secure facility, deposited in a clear, security-proof bag. We're talking about armored trucks, taking money to the bank, clear procedures for reconciliation of collections and deposits, and so there are lots of sort of downstream issues with collecting coins and cash, not to mention it's just, frankly, these machines are more expensive if you accept cash and coin, to the tune of, 30, 40,000 instead of 15, 20,000 per machine. But at this point, we believe that some sort of physical currency, it's important to take physical currency.
Could there be a possibility of accepting cash and coin at some ramps but not others, or some lots and not others? I mean, is that an option for us as we help to train ourselves as a community to 100%. Make this transition?
100%, yeah. I believe that that's absolutely possible. It would probably reduce the overall costs, as I mentioned, but yes, very much possible. You'd have to be very clear about how you sign that, how you promote that, because people might be confused.
Well, Mr. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know there's been a number of seniors since we started talking about this that didn't make the other studies. They didn't go downtown, but they still go downtown every once in a while. And they had mentioned to me they would still somehow like to have a cash or a coin option for street parking. Didn't discuss ramps, so I would like to see, I think that'd be a good viable option to still have some type of option, but I also understand they cost a lot more too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think realistically, you make a good point of the fact that we, from an equity standpoint, we probably need to continue to accept some form of cash or coin for the time being. But I do think we need to have a real discussion about, and as we make this final recommendation to us as a council, have a real discussion about what that cost is going to mean for everyone else, for the entire community. Because if it is going to be double the cost or, that much more expensive to do something, I wonder if maybe we could have some sort of a hybrid type environment where it's done in some parts but not others of the community. But yeah, go ahead.
Eric Haggett with Walker also. I was just going to add those reloadable cards that you all asked about. Those can also be used in place for people that are unbanked or underbanked. So instead of bringing cash, you can use those reloadable cards to add money to and pay, in the actual facility with a card, but it's something that you've, paid for with a check or with cash or what have you.
Kind of like Mr. Resnick, that was your point earlier, a bit like that scenario.
Interesting, thank you. Okay.
Any other questions on off-street facilities? So we talked a lot about systems here. So to power these systems, we talked about the technologies that are needed. So multi-space pay stations, we talked about those. That's what you need to accept the payment. The LPR camera does the enforcement. Something called a virtual permit management system. So this takes care of those on-street and those surface lot contracts, right? Without the use of physical hang tags. We can put folks' license plates on file and they don't need physical hang tags anymore. These are virtual permits. Something called a citation management system. This is sort of a back end, almost like a source of truth for the city in terms of rates and permits and payments. It really allows the city to do the enforcement. And so these are the 4 systems, 1, 2, 3, 4 there, that we're helping the city move through a process to develop specifications to acquire these systems. And I just want to make the point that all 4 of these systems off to the left, they power the on-street parking environment, but they also power the off-street surface lot environment. So if you think of off-street surface lots and on-street parking as very similar, none of these areas have gates, they're all open. We manage them the same way, we collect payment the same way. They're very similar, they take the same technologies to power those 2 systems. The ramps, those are that's a separate system. It's a separate integrated parking access revenue control system that we talked about that really just manages everything in the ramps environment. So you essentially have 2 separate systems that you're dealing with from a user and from a operator standpoint. But I do want to make the point that a single mobile payment app, so that's going to be the same across the entire system, whether you're parking on street, in a surface lot, or in a ramp, it's the same mobile payment app experience. Questions here? All right, so again, I've alluded to this. We're helping the city develop specifications and an RFP, or request for proposal package, to upgrade these systems. This process is ongoing. We've developed specifications and construction drawings about where certain elements, physical elements, need to be placed in these ramp environments. We're hoping to release this RFP out to the vendor community here sometime soon. This is slated for the council's agenda on October 2nd to review this RFP. We are hoping that we can get at least the first phase of equipment upgraded and installed by next year. So we're looking at probably a summer, fall timeframe next year. And so there is a lead time, there is a process for that. I do want to note that we are strictly vendor neutral. We are aware of a variety of vendors in the market, but it's really about the city and which vendor or vendors can best meet the city's objectives. Any questions on this? This is ongoing. This will be in front of the council in October.
Ms. Farber, go ahead.
Yes, just a real quick question on a potential range for the budget.
Yes.
Just your initial thoughts.
So, if I may, probably pull down here. I had a feeling you would ask me that question. So we have put together like very high level cost estimates. So again, these don't include things like demolition. In some cases, there are bollards, like physical bollards in the ramps that need to be moved to protect the gates. There are old like fence and sort of like lane delineators that need to be moved. There is signage that needs to be improved, lighting. So this doesn't include any of that. But this is essentially what we'd call a total opinion of probable cost. So the way we do this is that it's really based on the number of entry and exit lanes. So roughly speaking, it's about $30,000 per lane to do new equipment. The pay-on-foot stations, if we're assuming a full-blown pay-on-foot station that accepts, physical currency, we're looking at about $40,000 for a pay-on-foot station. So we're looking at about $1.5 million for all ramp facilities. The on-street parking, it's about $1.2 million. We're looking at the pay stations themselves at about $8,000 to $10,000 per pay station. And then the mobile LPR cameras, those are typically about $40,000 per camera. Those can typically just be attached to like a normal city vehicle. So you're looking at somewhere in the range of $2.5 to $3 million. And so this is something that you're phasing over time. So I think it's still up for debate about which facilities we want to prioritize. What is most important? I think we have thoughts on that. We can provide those. But I think that there is still ongoing discussion about which ramps need to be attacked first. So I think you can think of it as this is an estimate. It's based on the number of entry and exit lanes.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about a range for the marketing fees, the wayfinding fees, the educational brochures, things like that?
I might look to you all for help on that one. We do believe that y'all have a wonderful staff. I mean, folks like Kristen Hill have been, integrally involved in this project. We think a lot of that can fall on the city. A lot of the signage, like for the mobile payment, that signage is going to be free of charge. They're going to provide signs for you. I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to have to get back to you when you're talking about. We think that there's an internal rebranding effort that needs to happen. We'll talk about that in a second. New logo, new fonts, new colors, basically a new communications approach. That's essentially internal staff time. But then you're looking at things like, at a minimum, signage, so directional signage, exterior signage, and then probably some basic lighting and painting improvements, and some of the ramps would be recommended. We can put together an estimate on that. We think the number one priority is the equipment. Really can't do a lot of what we're talking. If we want to bring new folks downtown, we want to serve new customers. We have some wonderful things going on in Dubuque and in the area. It's really hard to do that with the current conditions that we have.
No, I appreciate that. It's just,
thank you.
I'll look forward to the more thoughts about how to communicate to newcomers to Dubuque as well as to the residents.
Super important.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Wethel.
I think this is a good time to ask this question. So you had mentioned that we and many cities cannot support our parking through user fees, that's just not a practical idea. However, you said that over $2 million, we are over $2 million from a balanced parking budget right now. And so, in essence, how, as part of your consulting, can you show us benefit in financial benefit to the city based on our budgeting processes of, say, at 5 years, recouping some of the cost? How deep do you dive
so
into
my
that?
colleague is going to talk about revenue projections here at the end.
Right.
We do believe that new equipment, new signage, easier, more sensible policies, it's really going to help drive compliance. It's going to help bring in new revenue. The new equipment is going to allow you to sell things like overnight permits for residents. It's going to allow you, frankly, to use the ramps for event parking. We'll talk about Chaplin Schmidt Island. If you haven't heard, they're proposing a 10,000 person venue for concerts. That's 4,000 parked vehicles. Where are they going to park? How would we park them downtown in our ramps, and we shuttle them over there? That's an opportunity that we're just not tapping into because we really just can't because of our current technology situation. We think there's a modest uptick in revenue based on some changes that we're proposing to rates tonight. We did do a theoretical exercise, like what would permits have to be? What would the price of permits have to be to break even as a system? I mean, it's crazy. We're not ever advocating for permit prices like that, but the reality is that we have 6, 7 parking ramps. We have a lot of assets, and we don't have enough demand. We need more demand. So whatever we can do to bring more workers downtown, more residents downtown, more event goers downtown, more hotels downtown, that's what we need to do. We need people filling these facilities, and at 6 o'clock, they shouldn't be empty. They should be full with the nighttime crowds. So that's really the only way that we believe you're going to get out of that situation you're in right now. But you can't do any of that without a modern system. So unfortunately, we believe there's a little bit of money that needs to be spent in order to accrue those benefits.
Sorry, I jumped ahead, but thank you.
No problem. We'll get into that.
So I'm going to do a quick time check for us here. We're just about an hour in, and I see we're about halfway through, give or take, on the slides here.
That was the hard part.
So we got through the hard part. I'm thinking maybe for the sake of efficiency for us as a council, let's do this section by section from here on out. So I see we're doing branding next.
Yeah.
We'll do questions and answer after that. Perfect. How does that sound for you?
Is the energy level okay?
Everything's good. Everything's great.
This one won't take long. Branding, communications. This is so critical. We believe that an overhaul in the parking brand needs to occur here. A new signage and wayfinding strategy needs to occur here. A lot of the confusion that we heard from stakeholders is, I don't know where to park. I don't know what the rules and regulations are. I didn't even know that was a city facility. I had folks tell me they didn't even know the intermodal ramp. They didn't even know what it was called, first of all, and they didn't even know it was a city ramp and that they could park in there. So we need to leverage our city staff. A lot of cities don't have the wonderful city staff that you do. So Park Omaha in Omaha, Nebraska, they have a unified brand strategy. It's clear, it's recognizable, it creates trust among customers, but they've hired and outsourced this to a third-party communications company. But we believe that there are some internal staff that can be leveraged for this work, and in fact, they've been part of this process. Park DBQ, sort of an early concept that we've thought about, but everything in Omaha looks the same. The signage looks the same. The website looks the same. The materials about, validation accounts and all of this looks the same. It creates trust and recognizability. It's super important. We need to think about wayfinding and signage, really integrating the system into an overall wayfinding strategy for downtown. I know there are other wayfinding efforts, and so this is really critical. We can't have, 5 different parking signs. They all need to look the same. They all should be blue. They should be white lettering. It should be the city brand, and they should all look the same. This is super, super important. As we get into the facilities or to the facilities themselves, we need to think about things that just make them more comfortable and inviting. We heard a lot from folks about, I don't like parking in ramps. I don't feel safe. I don't really understand how to use them. I've never been in a ramp before. It is extremely important that ramps are well lit, that they are bright, that you use color and graphics and directional signage to direct folks to theme, so folks know I'm on the purple floor or I'm on the orange floor. It just creates a level of comfort. It creates a level of wayfinding. This is really, really important. As you get into ramps, we see a lot of fun stuff with graphics, with symbols, with directional signage. This isn't very expensive to do. And in fact, there are probably public artists here in the city of Dubuque right now that would love to paint your parking facilities, whether the inside or the outside. Super, super easy to just take a single wall near a stairwell, paint it orange, stencil in a level 2 indicator, and you've dramatically increased the comfort of the facility. So this is really, really important stuff. Any questions on this stuff? All right. On street, well, first we're gonna dive into policy. So this is where we get into what are our proposed alternatives and options as we look at policy changes, modifications to really streamline the system. So dealing with on-street first, we talked about the current system, about 1,800 metered spaces. There are a variety of time limits. We got 2-hour and 10-hour spaces. We got 4-hour, 1 hour, 20-minute, 40-minute spaces. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. I think it's confusing for customers. I think it's difficult to enforce. It's difficult to operate and collect money. And frankly, it's just a bit confusing. There's no need for it to be this way. This is pretty common in other cities. What happens is that over the years, city parking operations get calls from people and they say, hey, can I get a 1-hour meter? Can I get a 20-minute meter? And then all of a sudden, it looks like this 10, 15 years later. What we would say is dramatically simplifying things. Our preferred alternative for your consideration is to have 2 time limits, a 3-hour time limit at $1 per hour and a 10-hour time limit at 50 cents per hour. So you can see the table there of sort of current and proposed. We would eliminate all the other time limits and all the other rate bands. We would have 3-hour meters and 10-hour meters. And so in the core of the city, Millwork, Main Street area, if folks are parking for more than 3 hours, we want them parking in the lots and in the ramps. We don't want them parking on street. That's not what your business community wants. Where the specific meter time limits are going to be, that's to be determined. We're still working through some things with city staff, but we do believe that the 1 hour per hour is consistent with places like Cedar Rapids. We're not offering any changes right now to on-street enforcement hours. So right now it's Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5. So if you came to this meeting, you knew that they weren't enforcing meters, right, Russ? Not enforcing meters anymore. We're not proposing any changes to that at this point. We are also proposing 10-minute pickup drop-off spaces. So we hear a lot in Dubuque about, well, I just want to pop in, I just want to, I just need to go to the post office. We're saying that the city could place 10-minute pickup drop-off spaces fairly uniformly across the downtown core paid parking area, let's say 1 or 2 per block, to offer kind of an olive branch to folks to say, hey, if you're just making a quick stop, park in one of these spaces. The challenge of these spaces is you can't really enforce them, because as a city, you'd have to be driving past a space every 9 minutes to enforce it. So this is sort of an honor system. We're saying to people that, listen, we want you to respect these. We're offering these as a way to promote business access, promote, customer service. In some places, this can be self-enforced. So if the city could tell businesses to say, hey, if you see people parking in these, give us a call. We'll come by and check it out. But this is something that we're proposing at this time. And again, the goal is to move people that are parking for more than 3 hours. If they're in the core of the city, let's park in the off-street lots, let's park in the ramps. We got plenty of room for you there. Any questions on time limits and rates for on-street parking? Okay, citation fine amounts. So at this point, we are seeing a situation where people would rather pay, and Ryan Nucky, you'll have to remind me, the citation amount than the actual meter amount. So they basically say to themselves, it's more economical for me to just get a ticket than it is for me to pay for parking. So we believe that the citation fines need to be right-sized. They need to be more appropriate to provide incentive to get the behavior that we want. We have researched other cities. We are proposing fine amounts here. You can see the current in the middle and the proposed on the right. We want to make it very clear that payment compliance should be the #1 objective. So it should never be the objective of a city parking operation to get a significant amount of revenue through citations. We don't want to be punitive. We want to provide really clear instructions. It's super easy to pay for parking. We're giving you tons of options to pay. You can use the mobile app. You can walk to these pay stations. The signs are very clear. The rules are very sensible. We want to drive people to compliance and not punish them. And we want to emphasize compliance and payment capture. Any questions on citation fines? All right. I'm going to hand it off to Eric, who's going to talk to you about off-street parking right now.
Hello again, all. Thanks for having me. Just to give Kevin a break on his voice. Again, Eric Haggett, Director of Planning with Walker. So a lot of this stuff is talking about existing versus, a potential change in the future, how operationally things would change, how rates might change. This slide here is just to indicate, where currently parking ramps are versus lots. You can see, high concentration in the core of downtown. As you move out to the fringes of downtown, fewer options. But we're going to be talking about what to do in the core with all of these off-street facilities. So, as Kevin mentioned, right now your system's really geared toward, your off-street system is really geared towards permit parkers, the typical 9 to 5 people that used to be coming down 5 days a week pre-pandemic, that maybe no longer are, maybe they're not coming at all, maybe they're coming a few days a week. The previous or the current system relies heavily on reserved parking. So this space number reserved for XYZ, that space can only be used by that person holding that permit. If it is available at other hours of the day, it's often not clear, so those spaces sit empty when those people are not there. It's not very typical in larger cities with public parking systems of this size to reserve a significant number of spaces, because it really limits how many people you can serve. You want as many people able to use the spaces as possible, as Kevin mentioned, off hours, overnight, those sorts of things, while still providing a high level of service to the people that are paying, a permit rate and coming down to an office, maybe 5 or more days a week. So what we are discussing currently is limiting, I think 30% of spaces in the ramps right now are reserved for specific users. What we're talking about is limiting that to no more than 5 to 10% in any facility. and even no reserve spaces in intermodal. And this is really to, provide access to reserve spaces for those people that really feel like they need them and are willing to pay for them, but getting the maximum use out of all of the facility spaces so you can really encourage more people to come. You have more flexibility when it comes to new development, residential, those sorts of things coming in to allow, those spaces to be used more than just by that single person or that single permit. So unreserved permits, this is the other kind of permit that you all currently have. So as the name implies, you have a permit for a facility, but you don't have an assigned space. You can really park in any space, assuming, you don't park in an ADA space without a permit, but any of the other spaces in the facility that are not reserved or ADA. The modern equipment that Kevin discussed gives you access to those facilities, makes it very easy to get in and out. When you're within the facility, you really just go to the first available, whatever's most convenient, if it's one side of the block or the other, the stairwell, what have you. This is really the preferred method of operation when you're talking about permit parking to really allow for a facility to serve as many people as possible. I know we were just talking to Ryan Nucky. Instituting something like this, intermodal has allowed for oversell, which is basically you sell more permits than you have permit space available because not everybody shows up every day or at the same time. Modern technology systems allow you to track who is there when, generally. Permit parkers, not every single person. To say, well, we're seeing that even though we're selling 120 permits for these 100 spaces, we always have 20 or 30 available, maybe we can sell a few more. So that's really the concept behind the unreserved permit. Still giving people access to the facilities that they want, but increasing the ability of those facilities to serve more customers. And so I'm going to go through the ramps now to talk about what's existing and what the option is that we've been discussing most recently. So Iowa Street, existing transients can park in any non-reserved space, $1 an hour, $10 max. The future would be a similar, you can park in an unreserved or standard space. We have discussed allowing an hour of free parking because a lot of what we hear is people won't come down because of paid parking. This is a concession to those people that say, I want a free option or some free parking. Off-street is the place to do that because you want on-street spaces priced at a premium to encourage turnover, shorter durations of stay. So this does some of that. From a permit perspective, right now there's over 500 reserved spaces, and you can see the price differential here. Right now it's based on covered versus uncovered reserve permits, but these permit prices for reserve spaces aren't really different than unreserved permit prices, or not much different than unreserved prices in other facilities. So what's being discussed now is, as I mentioned, limiting the number of reserved spaces and then charging a significant premium for those people that want the reserved permits versus the unreserved. Okay. All of the permit holders will still have access to and be able to find a space in the facility. Using the updated technology, the city can monitor, as Kevin mentioned, if a number of transients are coming, it looks like the spaces are filling, the city can indicate, no more transient parking or contract parking only to allow permit holders in, but you are able to more efficiently use spaces in a popular facility to serve more customers. I did want to note here the rates that are discussed, $130 a month for reserved versus $65 for unreserved. That's just a starting point. It's based on what comparable cities are charging. It's based on the fact that you do want a pretty significant differential between reserved and unreserved to really make people think, do I need this extra privilege of getting, my name or number on a spot, or am I willing to pay a little bit less and maybe park on a different floor or at the other, on the other side of the garage versus in this space? And as we're going through this, you'll see a lot of similarities between the facilities. So Locust Street, very similar for transients, current rate, $1 an hour. Rates that we've been discussing, first hour free, $1 per hour thereafter, same kind of maintaining that price differential. Here, like Iowa Street, large number of reserve spaces. very little difference in the cost of those spaces versus unreserved elsewhere. Similarly here, we're talking about a smaller number of reserved permits, same kind of price differential, reserved versus unreserved, to really inspire those that want the reserved space to indicate. Fifth Street, currently, no transient parking is allowed. Just based on utilization and based on giving people options, we're actually discussing allowing transient parking in this facility with the new equipment. There's no reason why it cannot be operated in this way. At this facility currently, there are no reserve permits, but at a little lower rate. What we're talking about is a similar 5 to 10% of reserve permits, but here you'll notice a lower reserve permit rate and then a much lower unreserved rate. And that's really due to a couple factors. You know, Fifth Street is not as popular as maybe Iowa or Locust, a little further from some destinations, but it gives people an option if they still want a reserve permit. That $75 is not much different than what you can pay today for a reserved space, but you might have to walk a little further. On the flip side, if you want an unreserved space, your price is actually pretty significantly decreased from what you're paying today. So it's trying to balance, obviously, financial considerations of maintaining the system and trying to get as close to solvency as possible, but also giving people options so it doesn't look like the city is just trying to raise rates to generate more revenue. Five Flags, same transient setup here. Similarly, no reserve permits. We're actually proposing that nothing changes here, rates stay the same, another less expensive parking option. But one, it's not in the slide, but one of the facilities we've identified for potential event parking in the future as well. Central Avenue, same thing with transients. Similarly, no reserve permits today, and we're saying keep that the same as well. If people want a little further option, this is still a little bit less expensive than some of the more popular facilities, but there hasn't really been a desire for reserve permits here. If in the future, you know, that people do desire reserve permits in this facility or any of the facilities that don't have it, we would recommend no more than that 5 to 10%. Keep it to as few reserve spaces as possible. And then intermodal, despite the popularity of the facility, at least for the time being, we're talking about a similar rate structure. We have had discussions about in the future, you know, does it make sense for some sort of differential pricing for transients because it is much more popular, especially, you know, after hours and on weekends than some others, but right now the same sort of existing to future option. No reserve permits here just because this is a very popular facility. The city is currently overselling it. We think there's that opportunity. So we are talking about a price increase here due to its popularity, and we see this as one place where people really would pay the extra fee to try and get a space here. And then, this might be a little hard to see on the screen, but just did a little sort of city comparison. You can see Dubuque compared to a number of other cities. So we look at population, we look at number of facilities, and then typical transient and off-street, or transient, hourly and daily rates, and then the monthly reserved and unreserved rates. And you can see, you know, from what we've proposed, we're really not exceeding, we're exceeding several cities on the reserve side, but we're still not as high as, say, a Des Moines. We're also creating more of a price differential to really inspire that behavior change of, do you really need a reserve permit, or are you okay with an unreserved permit? Again, these are, you know, the current discussions we're having. There's nothing magic about that 130 number. It's really just creating that that sort of price differential that we discussed.
Can we pause here?
Oh, yeah.
So I just want to, I think we need to resist our urge to compare ourselves to Ames and to Waterloo and think of us more in comparison to Cedar Rapids. So take a look at how many parking ramps the city of Dubuque has compared to a city like Ames, which actually has technically more people than the city of Dubuque. So we have seven ramps, 18 parking slots, so a high degree of providing parking for the public. This means a lot of assets, frankly, a lot of expenses. So it's just a different system. It's hard to compare us to Waterloo and Ames, even though we're very similar from a population standpoint. We're sort of more like a Davenport or more like a Cedar Rapids, frankly. So just something to think about. Thank you.
And then we did just do a side-by-side here. This is the exercise that Kevin talked about. So current rates in the first, 4 columns there, the future option that I just went through in the sort of next 4, and then that break even that Kevin was talking about. So as he said, we would never advocate for or propose the break even rates, but just given the scale of the operation, the number of facilities, the deficit that there is currently, just from an operating perspective, so operating revenue minus operating expenses, not accounting for any of that deferred maintenance, the city's permit rates would have to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 to $200 per month, which is obviously far in excess of what's charged today. It's far in excess of what we would consider reasonable. This is assuming that everybody that parks today would continue to park at these rates, which I don't think is realistic. So it was really just an exercise to say, parking is an expensive infrastructure asset to own, to operate, to maintain. The city and other cities choose to provide that, that asset to spur economic development, to make it easier for people to come downtown, for any number of reasons. But trying to get it to a place where it is self-sustaining, is going to be progressive, iterative. It's not going to happen tomorrow because the rates just can't be charged. They're just not feasible. What we have tried to do, or have been able to do with this current construct that we're talking about is, so this is under the current rate regime, from an operating revenue and operating expense perspective, sort of the financial picture in the most recent fiscal year that we had at the time of this analysis. So that's where Kevin was talking about that sort of $2 million subsidy. The rate changes that have been discussed, for the most part, for most unreserved permit people, not going to be a significant change. The reserve permit is where you see more of a change, and we're actually providing a bit of a discount to transient parkers. The financial position, based on a high-level analysis, actually improves just slightly by the tune of about $200,000 a year. And I should note, a lot of that is driven by the proposed changes or the discussed changes to the on-street rates and just the better revenue capture with technology that's working and those sorts of things. So not insignificant, but doesn't get you the whole way there. And then, as I mentioned, the sort of break-even, quote-unquote, analysis that gets you all the way there. Something to keep in mind with this break-even analysis, including the fact that we don't think it's the reasonable rates to charge, is that this doesn't account for deferred maintenance. So, typically we would propose a city set aside $100, $200, $300 per year per ramp space for long-term capital maintenance needs, concrete repair and replacement, structural repairs, new elevators, new lights, etc. So that is not even accounted for in this analysis, and it certainly doesn't account for the maintenance that has built up over the years that needs to be done. All things to keep in mind as you're mulling these over. Before I turn it back over to Kevin, any questions about pricing theory, why we are discussing on-street rates versus off-street, reserved versus unreserved permits, any of that sort of thing?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Farber.
Has anyone had communication with the businesses downtown about a potential change in these rates, just for feedback purposes?
Yeah, so we did have a work session in, I believe it was the middle of July, with some invited stakeholders, downtown business stakeholders. I think it's just really important to know that we're not talking about really any diminished level of service. So yes, I agree that reserved parking, it's pretty sweet. You get your space, it's always there. You always know that it's there. So we are talking about essentially doubling the cost if you want that reserved space for that level of service. The modern system, modern equipment, there's no diminished level of service to have an unreserved parking permit. In fact, we're talking about adding fixed LPR that's going to speed up entry and exit. So I would argue that any time that you're going to spend looking for an unreserved space, you're going to make up from the speeding up of the entry and exit. I can just tell you that we were at the city of Rochester, Minnesota. We're doing a rate study with them. A couple weeks ago, I think we visited 5, 6 parking ramps there. I think I counted a total of 10 reserved parking spaces across 6 parking ramps.
What was the feedback, though, from the local businesses?
The feedback, we got one individual, I believe it was from, I want to say Heartland, that had basically said that they felt that there shouldn't be any reserved parking in Locust just because they felt like they couldn't access the facility in certain times. One of the businesses did express concerns, like time issue concerns with, my customers need, or my employees need reserved parking. There were some concerns about the price increase. Again, these are just proposals. I think it's important that we don't have a reserve permit at 100 or let's say 80 and an unreserved permit at 65 because there's not enough delta there to really incentivize that. When folks have a reserve permit, they're essentially renting public real estate from you. So we believe that they ought to pay a premium for that. A modern system will not slow them down. They will have really no significant diminished level of service. It is very typical across this country that public assets have primarily unreserved parking. You can serve more customers that way.
No, so I totally agree with that statement. I was just concerned that the users and the people that would be there from the 9 to 5 would have some input or just to give you some feedback so that the whole conversation was socialized just a little bit so they are the users, and we want to make sure that everybody has been communicated with and is collaborating
and
with
we're hearing
us.
from both sides of that
Okay.
perspective.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I did want to add, one benefit you do have of having the amount of parking you do is that people will still get a good experience in whatever facility they're in because they have the ability to find another space nearby, even if they don't have their reserved space. So
Sure,
I
no,
guess that is
appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Another question. Mr. Resnick.
No, we're not studying rates at all tonight, but we're just looking at the $1 an hour rate, and then the minimum you had suggested was 3. Does anybody have a 2-hour and a 9-hour?
On street?
Yeah, so it's a 2-hour and a 9-hour, so $2 or $4.50, and then if you're in the restaurant and for some reason the service is slow or you just have a great time and you want to stick around, you can add with the app another 2 hours.
So we actually looked at, and you couldn't really do this from the physical meters because they don't really have data, but I love data, and we got some data from your mobile payment provider, to say that the average length of stay downtown was about 2 hours, 2.15 hours. And that's very typical, that it's like over 2, but not quite 3 on street. This is on street length of stay.
Right.
So in our estimation, the 3-hour time limit captures the vast majority of that crowd. If you, let's say, park for 1 hour and you want to extend, you can do that with your mobile app, or you can walk back to the pay station to extend as long as you're not exceeding the 3-hour time limit. In theory, you could move your car after 3 hours to another spot, but the 3 hours is the time limit. If you want to park on street for 10 hours, we'll have those spaces too. Those spaces are going to be a little bit further out. If you really want to park on street for 10 hours, it's not going to be in the core of the city. It's not going to be in front of Brazen because they don't want someone parking there for 10 hours. You should be in the lot, you should be in the ramp, or you can park further out for 10 hours. So yeah, you could extend it. 3 hours is just very typical.
Right.
We don't need the 1 hour.
Sounds like we're going to have some versatile, arrangements that we can choose, when it finally comes to it. A lot of good data, though. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions?
Go for it.
All right. So other sources of revenue, just wanted to talk about that for a second. Surface parking lots. So this is a really important opportunity that we wanted to talk about. So our analysis indicates that these are a fairly inefficient use of space, really from a urban design perspective, a walkability perspective, and frankly from an economic development perspective. So our analysis indicates that the net operating income on the surface lots is about $75,000 per year. So keep in mind, that's 18 surface lots, nearly 1,600 spaces. This is nearly 15 acres of surface parking. Our utilization counts, I would think we had an aggregate occupancy percentage of like 25, 26%. So that means 75% of 1,600 spaces are essentially just sitting empty at peak utilization. So this equates to 11 cents earned per square foot per year for the surface parking lots. So we would just ask, are there opportunities to sell surface parking lots, to explore partnerships, to explore lease opportunities, to bring development and density and just frankly more demand and more users downtown? If we have folks that just love parking in certain surface lots, let's say they have a permit to park in a surface lot, we have room for them in the ramps. We can move them in the ramps. And so 18 surface lots is a lot compared to, no pun intended, to the other cities that we looked at. And so surface parking lots are a big, big opportunity. And really event parking too is another significant opportunity. I talked about Chaplain Schmidt Island. We're working with the city and with DRA on that as well. They're talking about 10,000 event goers, concert goers, and by our estimates, that's about 4,000 vehicles that need to park in addition to just the typical demand. So that whole area is going to have new demand, new hotels, new breweries. So imagine that demand, that increases our current demand. And then we're adding a Beyonce concert on top of that. That's 4,000 vehicles. And if you've been down there for a concert, people are parking on the berm, they're parking in the river, they're parking all over the place. And so one of the things that we need to do is fill our ramps and our lots with folks. There is significant availability in our ramps downtown on nights and on weekends. There's no reason why we couldn't put them in Five Flags and Central Avenue ramp and then shuttle them over there for the concert and use that prepaid advanced reservation feature that we talked about. And then finally, a couple more comments. The upgraded technology, the kind of streamlined policies, the wayfinding, all of this stuff really should improve compliance. It should improve payment capture. I mean, there are conditions now where we're not capturing all the payment that's out there because we have equipment that is faulty. And so we do believe that you should see increases in revenue from that perspective. There are also options. Some cities consider extended on-street enforcement hours. This is not something we're proposing at this point, but let's say the city does experience just a crush of on-street demand, let's say in the Millwork District on weekends. One of the tools in the toolbox is to modify enforcement hours and require people to pay for parking on nights and weekends. We were not recommending that at this time, but that's something that we need to consider. The other thing, this is really, really important, is that we believe more varied ramp permit parking options, such as overnight parking. So we're not currently offering overnight parking permits. And so as we look at places like the Millwork District, that I've heard a lot of folks say, we don't have enough parking in the Millwork District. So we need to be selling overnight parking permits in places like the intermodal ramp for folks that want to park. They live in the Millwork District. And so we're filling the need for more parking in the Millwork District by offering that permit option. That's something that we're not currently offering, that the new technology will allow us to offer, the opportunity for somebody to come in and park after a certain period of time and then be out in the morning before a certain period of time. It's very typical. Cities like Madison have overnight parking permits, and they're geared toward residents. So park in the intermodal ramp, you have access during overnight hours. That ramp is sitting primarily empty at night. Let's fill it with residents, and by our calculations, at least in the near term, we can accommodate much of the growth that's expected in the Millwork District, much of the demand increases, the resident parking demand increase through things like overnight parking permits. And to Eric's point, things like moving away from reserve parking, continuing to oversell ramps just because not everyone shows up on the same day and at the same time, that's going to help drive up revenue, utilizing technology, serving the most possible customers possible. That's really going to drive up efficiency and drive up revenue. Any questions on revenue sources, surface slots, events? No? All right, so as next steps, last slide here, as I mentioned, this is kind of a multi-year iterative process. We think that the finalization of the technology specifications, releasing the RFP to upgrade the equipment, that's really the first priority. Then we get into prioritizing and phasing equipment for upgrades. So I think
it's important for us to start to think about what is the preferred prioritization of where we install new equipment first. A lot of that depends on capital funding available. Ryan Nucky could speak a little bit better to that. The system rebrand ideally should be done before this equipment goes live. And so our discussion with folks like Kristen Hill at the city is that as soon as, let's say, January rolls around, let's start to rebrand. Let's start to work on a process where we have a new logo, we have new signage, we have a new color palette, and we're thinking about how do we get signage out there. And we're creating videos, we're creating promotional materials to teach people about the new equipment, and everything gets unified so that you can start fresh. And then we get into operations and policy changes. Ideally, we're changing rates and we're getting all this stuff locked in before new equipment, but that stuff's going to take time. Obviously, that may not be a day one thing, and that's okay. But that's something that we're going to need to think about moving forward. And then I would also say that as we go, we're going to have to collect data and we're going to have to see how it's going, and we might have to tweak a few things as we go. It's not it's not uncommon for a city to implement something and then change it a little bit after it's implemented, to tweak it a bit, just based on how folks are reacting to it. And that's where data comes into play, and just understanding how folks are using the system. So at this point, we're going to stop and ask if there are any other questions. I do not have any other slides for you tonight.
Gotcha. Before we get to any questions we have or anything we want to say, I want to ask a really specific question to Mike and Ryan.
Yes.
Are there some specific things that you need from us tonight as a council? Any specific guidance that you want to make sure we get before you walk out the door? Or is this more just informational and we can ask questions and say whatever we want?
Just informational and ask questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like Mike said, this is just mostly informational, so you guys know where we're at and what we're doing. When the request for proposal comes out, we're still looking at vendors to have them come and tell us, hey, we could do this for you, or we could do this for you. So again, what Kevin was talking about tonight, these are options we can move forward with, but nothing's set in stone right now. We're still looking at new technology that's coming out and how do we put that together with a certain app. I do want to stress, we did say the word app a lot tonight. We will not have an app at Go Live because we have to pair the two devices together as we move forward. So as we hit Go Live, we're going to have new technology move in, and then we'll pair an app with it as we move forward. I just want to specify that. Thank you.
Gotcha. Mr. Sprang, go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin, for all this wonderful information. I am stuck on slide 54.
54.
Uh-oh, Eric, that's you.
I don't need an answer tonight, but you can get back to us. If you had an idea of surface lots we could X out, I'd love to know it, just to know which one. I mean, I wouldn't need to know now, but it'd be interesting to know which surface lots we could pare down, because clearly they're not making us any revenue. So why keep that many surface lots when we start comparing ourselves to other cities that are even larger than us?
Yeah, I mean, let me just open up. Here we go. Parking is a very sensitive issue. It elicits a lot of strong responses, but you just have to go, as sort of the proof is in the pudding with parking. You just look at how many people are using it and what kind of money are you making. So frankly speaking, places like Ninth and Bluff, off to the west, that little sliver, Russ, you might help me with some of these. Fifth and Bluff, unfortunately, I think 12th and Elm is one that we'd love to see people parking in the Millwork District. We know people need parking in the Millwork District. It's a little too far for people, but every time I've driven by it, there's been nobody in that lot. So I'm not into shock and awe, but I think we can just tell you the frank truth of just, if you have surface lots that you're paying to maintain, there ought to be people using them. Otherwise, we should think of a better use for them.
I was going to add, from a development perspective, obviously some sites are better than others. A sliver of a parking lot's not very great for a building. So, some facilities could be some surface lots could be very well used, but be an ideal development site. if there's a parking ramp with a lot of availability right next to that surface lot, maybe it's okay to long-term lease that or sell that or do some kind of joint development because there is parking capacity. Obviously, that'll be a case-by-case basis. If it's a surface lot in an area without other public parking options, maybe that development needs to include some shared space that could be public parking a portion of the time or all the time. So it's definitely very case-by-case. And, obviously, because you're potentially talking about selling an asset, consider if a sale is the right move versus a lease where you could still retain control and all those sorts of things. But we do think there are opportunities, and certainly everybody, I think, could agree that a beautiful building or a park or something like that is better than a surface park.
So I would say 9th and Bluff, 5th and Bluff, 5th and Main is a very popular one. Locust and 3rd is a very popular one. 4th and Central, that one, it's in an interesting spot. It's kind of underutilized, though. The ones in the Millwork District are, we'd like to see more folks parking in 12th and Elm. We know that, is it 10th and Elm, Ryan, that's being slated for a new park? Is that right, 10th and Elm, I believe? Health Center, Municipal Lot, that's one that we would question. The federal building parking, that's one that we would question. And so, frankly, I think it's just a way to, incentivize and welcome development, and you have no shortage of parking to move. If people have permits to park in these lots, we can find a spot for them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ms. Weffa.
When you had spoken earlier about implementation, you, I think, mentioned phasing in processes. Do you begin with one off-street parking ramp at a time? Could you speak to what that process is?
So I think it depends a little bit on funds available. And Ryan, I might ask you to speak to that if necessary. But in terms of sort of this question, I believe Councilwoman Farber asked about this earlier. There are certain facilities, I would say, places like Locust, Iowa, Intermodal, that when asked which ones do we attack first, frankly, those are the most popular ramps. Mm-hmm. They probably make you the most revenue, I believe, Eric. We have important customers parking in them. There's a dire situation as it relates to equipment, so that would probably be the first step. And we believe, based on funding available, that you could probably tackle a couple facilities as that first phase. As far as the on-street is concerned, ideally it would be done all together, because you really don't want some single-space old meters and some new pay stations, but there are clear areas, frankly, Millwork District, Lower Main, that obviously that's where most people are parking. That's where your revenue is coming from. That's where businesses want turnover to help promote access. So those are areas. So maybe there's a way to knock off 2 of the ramps in year 1, and maybe then we start to think about, prioritizing on-street areas as we move forward. We're going to get, to Ryan's point, proposals back kind of for the systems that we talked about that operate the on-street, as well as the gated ramp facilities. And at that point, I think we can decide, based on funds available, what are we going to tackle in year 1? How are we going to phase this over time?
So when the RFP comes back, it comes back as the entire system, and this is the cost of the entire system.
Yes.
Is there a discount if you do off-street and 2 ramps first?
So this is a great question, and so just be very, very clear, is that think of the ramps as a different system. So the ramps have their own technology. They're separate from everything else. It is going to be there is going to be a discount if you do all ramps in one fell swoop. Is that if you, let's say, do 2 ramps in year 1, and then it takes you 3 or 4 years to do the rest of them, that sort of unit cost is probably going to go up on the ramp equipment. All the other technology, that 1 through 4, those are the systems that we talked about that operate the surface lots and the on-street. So you're getting a bundle in that white box. You're buying a bundle of technologies that operate your on-street parking and your surface lots. Really, anywhere anyone parks that we take payment where we don't have gates.
You're buying a bundle of equipment. You're buying the pay stations, the mobile cameras, and then these two software systems that sort of manage everything. So that's the bundle that does on-street and surface slots. The other piece of this is the ramp, so that's separate. So I think we're putting out basically an RFP that says we want items 1 through 4 to manage our surface slots and our on-street, and we want a new updated gated system for our parking ramps. So we're going to get those proposals back, and at that point, we're essentially going to need to decide, do we want to move forward with both bundles? And if the ramp bundle, how many ramps do we want to move forward with in year 1, in year 2, in year 3? And then the other bundle, basically the question is, how many pay stations do we want to buy in year 1? Do we want to overhaul the entire on-street parking system in year 1? Or is it going to take 3 or 4 years to overhaul our on-street parking system?
Could you speak to what some cities our size do?
I would say it's ambitious to do all of this in year 1. I think that, our thought would probably be to focus on, I don't have specific city examples for you other than to say Omaha, it took them about 2 years to overhaul their entire system from top to bottom. I would say we probably need to prioritize a few ramps as being our highest priority ramps, and we probably need to look at high priority on-street areas to get new pay stations in, because Russ Steckline's having a heck of a time doing enforcement, collecting payment. There's just a lot of issues out there. So I would say that it's probably a 3-year thing. It's probably a few of the ramps, some of the on-street in year 1, and then maybe we get into year 2 where we're continuing to chip away at the ramps, and then we're expanding the on-street footprint. And again, the on-street is just getting more pay stations, basically.
Thank you.
Make sense?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Farber.
From an IT perspective, regarding the operation and the technology, which organization internally and externally will be managing that database of information or basically doing the maintenance of the system?
Yeah, great question. So we have been very closely involving Chris Coleman, Joe Pregler, others in city IT. The gated ramps, that's a cloud-based server system. It's kind of like a software as a service sort of model. You pay an ongoing hosting fee. The city will have a back end. Ryan's going to have the suite set up. It's basically a desktop computer that can operate the system. He can see in real time who's coming in, contract parkers, transient parkers. He can see his revenues. He can create reports that get emailed to him on a daily basis about revenue and utilization. And then from a support perspective, that company is on board for support, whether it's hardware support or software support. For the on-street system, it's the same thing. Everything's sort of getting funneled in here. You're going to have mobile payment information, and you're going to have information about people that pay at the pay stations, and then you're going to have information from your citation folks. And so you're going to be able to see which pay stations are the most popular, how many people are using the app. We have some cities that have 80% app usage. In Dubuque, it's probably more like 30% app usage. So you'll be able to see that, how long are people staying parked for typically. And so if you see, people are staying parked for 1 hour typically, well, maybe we don't need a 3-hour time limit anymore. So you could start to adjust that. And those companies have hosting fees, and then they provide ongoing support as well.
So basically, Ryan's group is going to be the system administrator for this, for the city, with Chris being the IT backup for you, and she'll manage the firewall and all the security.
That's correct.
Those
and all
kinds
the
of things.
systems
Okay.
are what's called PCI payment card industry compliant, so they have to be very much encrypted, and there's a lot of real stringent security measures that are in place in terms of payment information, if you will.
Yeah, because we want people to feel safe to park, and then safe knowing that their personal information is being safeguarded as well.
Exactly.
Okay,
I did
thank
also
you.
want to mention with the equipment, a lot of it is modular, so a credit card reader goes bad, it's pull out one piece, put in another. Same thing with the kiosks, there's, coin acceptors that you can transfer in and out. So I believe what we've been discussing is city maintains some stock of that, or you could also send a faulty piece back and get a new one and just sort of replace it. You don't have to call a specialized maintenance tech every time something happens.
Yeah, as the city does now, the city has a pretty extensive inventory of spare parts. There is some level of just knowing how this stuff works. Like, how do I change the receipt roll, and what do I do if this happens or that happens? So there's some basic learning that the city's going to have to do from just a physical maintenance perspective for all these systems. And then there's this process of, well, what do I do with the information coming back to me? How do I manage the facilities? How do I know what the oversell percentage should be based on the information coming in? So the city is going to have to learn the systems. But I would say, I mean, City of Minneapolis uses these systems. Big airports, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Chicago, I mean, they're gated systems. These systems aren't breaking. These systems are very reliable in terms of the number of vehicles that are coming in and out. Yes.
I know we're running long on time, but I have one question. You had mentioned the deferred maintenance that you have is estimated per parking space in a ramp at $200 to $300 per year.
So that was actually, for a new parking facility, that's what we would recommend a city set aside to deal with
Annually.
future maintenance. Correct. So that's so you don't have deferred maintenance. So, in 10 years after your facility's built, you're going to have some significant projects to do. You've built up a pool of money to do those projects.
Sinking fund, kind of like a sinking fund.
The estimates that are being put together have been put together based on condition assessments of the city's facilities. That is not reflective of that amount. That is just what we would typically recommend a city set aside.
For a new ramp.
For a new ramp that is either brand new or has been maintained, and that is the money that you'll need going forward for things like new lighting systems, elevators, structural repairs, that sort of stuff.
Okay. So I think maybe my next question is for the administrative team in what we currently do or have done in years past. And I'm sorry, maybe I should know this better, but what we do for ramps, do we calculate per space? We set aside a specific amount of money. So that's something as we create this system that we would want to maybe begin to consider in maintenance annually to set aside, or?
And the only thing I could say to that is maybe, because we have a limited amount of resources and we target those resources at the greatest needs on an annual basis. It doesn't have anything to do with $300 a space or anything like that. So, I mean, we'll look at their suggestions and recommendations, and they might be pie in the sky. And so what we'll do is we'll take the resources we have and target them to the needs we have and keep our ramps.
I did some quick math, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention that is sort of an ideal world. Very few parking facility owners actually do that.
Okay.
But setting aside something in a reserve for those repair projects is pretty crucial because as you go 10 or 15 years down the line, there's going to be big projects, and then you are trying to figure out, how do you allocate the resources you have to prevent significant issues, things that are dangerous, that sort of thing.
Hold on, my turn. Thanks. Two quick things here. During budget season this year, parking was allocated $2.5 million over FY24 and FY25 total. So we have 1.2 this year, I believe 1.3 next year. Don't hold me hard on that, but it's pretty close there. So this project, even if the RFP goes through, by the time we got supply and put everything together, we probably won't be starting this until we're in FY25. So funding should be there easily for initial startup. Finalizing everything will depend on what technology we go for. As far as the ramp repairs and ongoing maintenance with them, Steve Sampson Brown, Russ Deckline, and myself, we had Desmond come out of Chicago. They've gone through the majority of our ramps and have given us a PM sheet to go through. And last year we submitted for that, and we were able to cover our major repairs that we needed to make. And this year we'll go through that list again and what needs to get repaired, what we can do in-house, because a lot of this we can't do in-house, and then what we can push off for a year or two that's not a safety concern.
I think there's not a heck of a lot of ways to sugarcoat just owning a lot of physical assets that have a ton of concrete and rebar, and here in Iowa, and there's salt and snow, and obviously it requires upkeep, it requires maintenance, and it's just sort of the reality of the situation that we're in here.
You didn't sugarcoat it.
Is what it is.
Well, Kevin, Eric, Ryan, Russ, Steve, hiding back there, thank you very much for this. This has been incredibly helpful. It's a ton of great information. I mean, just absolutely great information for us to be able to work with and to start to talk to the community about. So looking forward to the next steps in the process. Looking forward to being able to continue to ask questions to figure out how to move this forward, and looking forward to the learning process that we're all going to go through, because it's going to be one. We are basically going from Back to the Future to Back to the Future 2 right now is the way this is looking. I mean, we're really moving forward fast here. So it's going to be a great move into being a more modern city, but it's going to take some time and some effort and obviously some funding, as we've discussed, but really looking forward to it. So thank you very much for all this. Well, we are not done working. We have a closed session here, so I'd entertain a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jones?
I move that the council go into closed session in accordance with Chapter 21.5 of the Code of Iowa in order to discuss pending real estate transactions.
Second.
A motion by Jones, second by Wethel. For the record, the attorney the city council will consult with on the issues to be discussed in closed session is City Attorney Crenna Brumwell. Trish, would you call the roll, please?
Resnick.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We are in closed session.